In this episode of Detroit Performs, an artist shares her inner thoughts on an exhibition, how Detroit's historic Orchestra Hall turned to jazz, and how a Philharmonic survives. It's all ahead in this edition of Detroit Performs.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the A. Paul and Carol C. Scott Foundation, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, the National Endowment for the Arts, the DeRoy Testamentary Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Detroit Performs. I am your host, DJ Oliver, and today I'm coming to you from my social distancing abode. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy out there. It is time to experience arts and culture that we have right here in Metro Detroit. First up, artist Sabrina Nelson delves into her exhibition, Why You Wanna Fly Blackbird, which tells the story of how Black women feel when their womb, their home, becomes empty after losing a child.
I think my medicine is art. My language is art. I think the term artist means to be responsible for what's happening in the world, how you see it, how you record it, how you make things that are a result of what you are trying to say, whether it's a question you're answering or a story you're trying to tell, or here's something I need to make because it's just embedded in me, like I have to make something. Detroit is embedded in who I am. I've been here all my life, since the rebellion in 1967, that's when I was born. And so everything around me becomes a part of the story I'm trying to tell or the question I'm trying to ask. My superpower is being able to visually communicate how I feel about what's happening in the world. Nina Simone says if you're going to be an artist, it's your duty to reflect what's happening in the world. And in the world that I live in, from the time I can remembering, there's always trauma and hurt and pain. And I'm not always talking about that, but you can't ignore it. And on this day, I think about the lives that are lost, that are constant, like coming at me through different mediums. And so I'm thinking about homicides and deaths of young people and how I'm affected by it. But I'm talking about death where people aren't considered people, like you don't matter. You're not important. So I'm just gonna take your life. I don't care how old you are, I don't care who you belong to. And when that person is missing from our communities, not just the blood family is affected. We are all, and we should all be concerned. You know, a life is a life, a human is a human. And so in this work, I'm talking about that pain. The name of the exhibition is Why You Wanna Fly Blackbird, and I got it from a Nina Simone song, who talks about Black women like, how dare you try and be happy in your life? How dare you not expect pain? Pain is gonna come. You have to move through it and you have to live, but pain will be here. I didn't want the colors to be so seductive that it draws you in as pretty. Like, I don't like the idea of my work being pretty. I want it to be impactful. I want it to be deeper than just what you see. And I wanted it to be large enough to have some girth to it. So these particular pieces are very large drawings. They're also reliquaries, if you will. So they talk about like the body, the housing of the bodies that we have, like the home, and then what it's like to have a nest with no eggs in it. thinking about the empty nest of children who never return. You know, I don't care how old they are, they never can return. So I'm just talking about the darkness in that and expressing it with the most eloquence that I can. The cages will represent empty homes. That can be the home that they lived in, that can be the community that they lived in. How do you deal with that? You know, that womb that's empty. And so when we lose these people that are not treated with value out of our communities, how do you deal with that? So LaVon is helping me on the dresses because I want to make dresses that will hang from the ceiling just above the patrons' heads, but the bird cages will be the empty wombs underneath the dresses. And so I'm asking him to help me figure out how I'm gonna make the dresses, which are made out of Japanese rice paper, so that they can be sheer enough that the bird cages can go underneath them and the patrons can see them with the lighting. And hopefully they have the impact that's in my head and in my heart. I want people to pay attention to it and to be more empathetic with others' lives. If you see something happening and you can do something about it, why wouldn't you? And so when I look at the homicide rates across the country, they're incredibly high for African American, Indigenous, and also Latin American children. And so if this is all I can say and do about it, I want someone to know that I care. Even though they're not my children, I care. That they're missing, that they're gone, that there's, you know, somebody should think about doing something about it. The motion of movement when I'm making these things, like when I did the nest here, you know, the motion of drawing and drawing and drawing, you know, that obsession of movement and what it feels like to do that. These movements that we do over and over become very much ritual. Maybe these are all prayers visually to say, I'm sorry that your life is gone, but I want to say that you meant something, that you were important. Every artist wants someone to look at their work for a long time. And I didn't want to make it so obvious and obtruse where it's like, you know, you see people getting killed. But I think the work and the drawings and some of the paintings that I'm using can be seductive. So I want people to make sure that they walk away with knowing that I'm in a world, I am affected by it, and don't just listen to the news and be in the world and not really take part in what's happening. Think about what your voice is and what your superpower is and see what you can do to help. I want to say something that's important, and I want to leave this world with something that someone's learned from me. My work might be sensual, it'll draw you in, and then it's gonna slap you a little bit. And that's what I hope I show.
You can learn more about Sabrina Nelson, as well as all the artists that we feature on DetroitPerforms.org. Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald are just some of the iconic performers that have graced the Orchestra Hall stage. Up next, you'll see how the hall was transformed in the 1940s to the Paradise Jazz Theater, where some of the greatest jazz musicians of all time came to perform, making it one of the most important venues during the decade for Black entertainment in Detroit.
The Depression was horrible, but in terms of Detroit music, it was nearly fatal.
When you think about turning points for an organization, the late 1930s is one of those points where you think about, well, it could all fall apart here. And in fact, a few years later, it does, and the orchestra goes out of business.
With a country on the verge of a Second World War and the automotive industry more concerned with building tanks than cars, the Detroit Symphony's move out of Orchestra Hall had left the venue's fate hanging in the balance. While it had been built on the legacy of Europe's great classical musicians, it would take a new, truly American art form to save it.
Jazz is a huge part of the history and the present day of Detroit. As jazz was becoming one of the dominant popular styles in America, Detroit was one of the centers of that.
There was a moment in time where the concert hall was just for the orchestra. You know, jazz musicians weren't even being thought of. And then all of a sudden it started to turn around. And when it turned around, people started to realize the significance of it.
When the Detroit Symphony Orchestra originally left its home in 1939, Orchestra Hall had a brief revival as the town theater. But there were some in the community who still knew that it was meant to be more than just another Woodward Corridor movie house.
It was purchased by a couple of theater magnates, Ben and Lou Cohen. And there was a businessman's association across Woodward Avenue in what was known as Paradise Valley. And so they came over and said, look, let us take the town theater, old Orchestra Hall, and we're going to bring headline events. And so they reopened it as the Paradise Theater.
Paradise Theater was close to the Brewster Projects, and it was close to the surrounding neighborhoods that blacks were living in at the time.
And so this building becomes a major place for all of the top African-American jazz and related acts. So the Duke Ellington Band plays here, and Louis Armstrong and Lionel Hampton and Billy Eckstein and Lucky Millinder and Earl Hines.
You have to remember that during that time, these people were recording artists. So you had all of their records. You knew what they sound like, and now you're going to actually see them. That was phenomenal experience.
Oh, we had Lucky Milner, we had Erskine Hawkins, Billy Eckstein, Sarah Vaughan. You'd go to Sarah Vaughan so that you could sing along with her.
One time I was here, Lionel Hampton was doing his theme song, Flying Home. And the rhythm got so great that people started getting up and dancing out in the aisles. So that was a sight to see.
I was in the balcony, and the energy was so high, and everybody was clapping and they were stomping, and we were all so happy. I told my cousin, I can feel the vibration of this balcony moving, because everybody was so into Lionel Hampton.
Just shaking, people clapping, people screaming, people stomping. And we just had a ball. Every great jazz player came there to play, and it was something to go there because the Paradise was a beautiful place, and it is still beautiful. But we were in awe. You know, we were African Americans. You couldn't go to some white venues because of segregation. And that's one place we could go to. And we were happy to go there.
The Paradise Theater was a necessity. It didn't create the environment. The environment needed that, so it was invented.
It was a safe place. It was an acceptable place, at least in my family, in my household. Some of the other places were off limits to a young girl at that time. So it had great importance.
You've got these two things that are going on. You have a war that's going on. It's chaos is going on. And only one block away in the Cass Court area, you were dealing with the Ku Klux Klan. We were not allowed on the west side of Woodward Avenue.
And I do remember 1943, the riots. It was terrible. But we could go there to hear music and relax.
This was a place to come to enjoy. People would forget about what was happening when you're coming in. This was a house of joy.
By 1951, however, the big band era was coming to an end, and so were the fortunes of the Paradise Theater. After 10 years as the center of jazz and a safe haven from troubled times, the doors of Orchestra Hall, now the Paradise Theater, would be closed once more.
What it basically was changed, just like everything else. Las Vegas is opening up. You got trios now, you got combos, you got smaller groups playing bars.
When you think about that period when it was just a jazz hall, that in itself speaks to me about the power of jazz and about the power of this American art form and how it kept the doors open here. So it only makes sense that we have this Paradise Jazz series here, because you have a strong fan base here.
Having Louis Armstrong or others in our facility bring a prominence and pedigree to it that connects with every generation. So I know my children love Louis Armstrong, just not because of his sound, but because of the connection he has to Orchestra Hall. And having them live in spirit in that hall brings a richness to the hall that you can't express in words. You can only feel it.
This is one of the few places that we play where the energy in the room when we play here is a jazz energy. In other places we play, there are people who are enthusiastic and they come up, but they don't have that kind of, there's an energy when you play here. I'm telling you, it's like the damnedest thing. They shout at the band, they shout with us, the energy. So the concerts are always longer here because we feel like playing more when we're here.
When we think about the rich tradition that's gone on here, it's both the highest level of classical music and it is the highest level of American vernacular music and African American culture have all happened in this building. And so the diversity of the people in Detroit that can say, Orchestra Hall, that's our building, is considerably wider than it is in a lot of cities that have a great Orchestra Hall-like building. That's real, profound, important stuff for this city.
After serving as sanctuary during a decade fraught with war and racial unrest, Orchestra Hall was transformed into actual sanctuary for 5 years as the Church of Our Prayer under Reverend James Lofton. By the following decade, however, the bleakest era in Orchestra Hall's history had arrived.
Now let's check out some upcoming events coming to you virtually from around the D. The Michigan Philharmonic, led by Nan Washburn, is finding ways to survive during the pandemic. Take a look as Nan joins WRCJ's Peter Worth.
Nan Washburn is music director of the Michigan Philharmonic. Tell us about what you've been saying with your colleagues in the orchestra and maybe other presenters and leaders of other organizations throughout Michigan and in your contacts.
Well, it's been interesting because I think, the first 2 weeks, everybody's just in shock. And then as we learn more, first it was just, we're going to have to cancel things this season and postpone some things. And then we'll be back to regular, and I think with weekly news reports and daily news reports, things are changing. So we're on lists and conversing and having webinars and many Zoom sessions with other arts groups and trying to figure out the best plan. Everybody's talking about similar kinds of things. Streaming obviously is something that everybody wants to do. Our board is also feeling like it's an opportunity for us to really shake some things up. We always been kind of a little bit different than other orchestras, but I think this is an opportunity for us to change some things up even more. I certainly want to get back to being able to have very large concerts with big audiences. I think that's probably going to be a little bit before we can get to that. I think conversing with other orchestras, we've also had to be talking with our youth orchestra conductors and other youth orchestra conductors, because all of a sudden we had to stop our weekly rehearsals. And thankfully, Hector Cattetti and Dennis Carter, our youth orchestra conductors, have been great doing Zoom sessions, which basically are like almost online individual lessons almost. And I think as we move forward, we're looking at still investigating maybe the possibility of doing something outdoors this summer, if we can spread out. We're looking at bringing in some small ensembles to play, just to be visible in downtown Plymouth, maybe Northville, making sure that everybody knows that we haven't gone away. Next year is actually our 75th anniversary season. And we're going to probably have to not do everything we wanted to do, but we want to make sure everybody is thinking about us and that we will be back and doing as much as we can this year. I think we're also probably going to be focusing on maybe some smaller ensembles that we already do. Obviously, we do. Our January concert is historically our miniature masterpieces. That is something that we do with maybe 15 players or less. And so I think we're actually in a good position because we've always been a flexible sized orchestra, that we do full orchestra concerts, but we do actually quite a few on the smaller side as well. So we're going to hopefully capitalize on some of that flexibility in the months to come.
I've been enjoying some of the performances, everything from maybe the 4 most famous notes in classical music from one of your Beethoven concerts to maybe the most famous music by one of my favorite 20th century composers, Arturo Marquez.
Wonderful composer. And we love that piece so much. I mean, it's a very popular piece, the Danson No. 2. But he's written some other pieces that we really hope to do soon as well. But it's very sultry and just wonderful rhythms, and I just love it. It really was Beth Stewart, our executive director, who thought, let's start using all our wonderful archival video. And so we've been sending them out. Beth has sent out a couple each week at least. So it's fun to kind of relive some of those great performances and know that that's a way that we can connect with our supporters.
I also saw an Andrew Lloyd Webber performance from Phantom. I think it might have been from a Halloween concert, because it looked like you may have been doing your best Amelia Earhart impersonation.
That was the plan. And what I didn't realize in doing that particular costume, which I was very excited about, was that once you put the little flaps of the helmet on, you can't hear as well. But actually in that clip, the percussionists with the brand new tam-tam are demonstrating, yes, in fact, you can hear this giant tam-tam. And the more I smiled at them, the more they hit it bigger and bigger and bigger. Halloween concerts are one of our most favorite things.
I also enjoyed hearing the very end of one of my favorite Dvorak symphonies. You know, you hear the New World all the time because it's great, and the 8th Symphony as well, but you shared a performance of the 7th, and I listened to the last movement, which really did give me goosebumps.
Oh, thank you. I'm so thrilled, because it is one of my favorite symphonies ever. And I performed it, I think, in college, maybe the first time as a flutist. And when we started rehearsing it, because it's not done as often, a lot of our musicians didn't know it as well. And they kept thinking, wow, why aren't we doing the 9th? Why aren't we doing the 8th? And I said, this is a fabulous symphony, but it's in some ways harder, I think. The rhythms, especially in some of the other movements, are very tricky. And, you know, but at the end, the musicians said, I think this is my new favorite Dvorak symphony.
Thanks, Nan, for all that you've shared with us from your archive and for telling us about what's ahead.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Detroit Performs. As always, for more arts and culture, head to DetroitPerforms.org, where you'll find featured videos, blogs, and information on upcoming arts events. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there, and we'll continue to do our part to bring you the best of Detroit's art scene. Until next time, get out there and show the world how Detroit performs, y'all. I'm DJ Oliver. Thanks for watching, guys.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the A. Paul and Carol C. Scott Foundation, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, the National Endowment for the Arts, the DeRoy Testamentary Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.